all right, and welcome to yet another episode of the Arena Craft Podcast, a show focused exclusively on Magic the Gathering Arena. I'm one of your hosts, Arjuna. I'm joined today by the other host, Covert Go Blue, and Covert Go Blue, happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday, dear Arena Craft Podcast.
Arena Craft Podcast cast.
Happy birthday to us. It's incredibly hard to sing with someone else over Zoom, so take that as you will, listeners, but great to see you, buddy.
I might have been trying to throw the match. I'm not going to lie.
Okay. Wouldn't be the first time.
I have to hide my singing abilities.
Paid actor.
Or lack thereof. How you doing, man? So, you have been doing this for a year.
Yes, I have been doing this for a year, and you've been doing this for, a little under a year, maybe like 80% of a year. And yes, so first of all, I'm stoked. Before we go any further, I want to thank each and every one of our listeners, both present and past, for showing up, listening to the show. I want to share that we hit a goal that I was hoping to hit before this episode was released, which is that we have officially been downloaded over 100,000 times on our podcast platform. So
boom.
Yep. So
wow.
That's a big milestone. That's all because y'all rock. And just want to let you know, a little peel back behind the curtains. Reaching a milestone like that in the world of podcasting is it's pretty big. It's a big milestone, and to do it within a year releasing your podcast means that your podcast is, in the upper echelon of successful podcasts. So thank you so much for all of you in the community who've helped make that happen. It's been an absolute pleasure serving you.
I'm happy for you. I know that you're going to say it's a we thing, but I definitely didn't join for a few months. I listened to you since episode 1, actually. I remember searching for MTG Arena podcast because there were a bunch of podcasts about events on MTGO and paper tournaments, but there was only one that I found focused on Magic Arena, and I remember the guests that you had on, and I remember a lot of the different shows and formats that you tried, and you were there week after week. This smooth, silky voice, full of Magic the Gathering. You have a curiosity to your presentation. Like you're looking deeper into whatever part of the game that you're into, and it's a fun journey to go on. And so when you asked me to be on the podcast, I was excited. When you asked me to be a co-host, I was through the roof. It had been a goal of mine to be a regular on a podcast or have a podcast about Magic someday. So it feels great to me, but I really, I would tell you to go stand in the solo spotlight and take a bow if we were performing on stage, if that makes sense. Because you've put a lot of work into this, and it's been great to be a part of it.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I really do. And I love it. You started to peel back the curtain on one of the questions that was submitted this week, which was the origin story of how you and I met. So that's a fun one. We'll definitely get into that. But yeah, suffice it to say, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, buddy. And podcast just got like 100% cooler once you came on it, and so it's been a real pleasure. Just making the climb together. And so basically, what this show is all about today is we're just going to celebrate the podcast and celebrate the community. And the majority of what the show is going to be is just us answering the many, 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 many questions that have been submitted by our wonderful communities. Last I checked, we had about 6 pages worth of questions. So I apologize in advance if your question doesn't get read on the show. It's not because we don't love you. It's just because we have a metric ton of them. And we'll save them. So, for a rainy day, we might whip out your question in the future. So stay posted.
Yeah, you never know. You better listen to every second of this podcast just in case.
Yeah, just on the off chance. I'm just going to spring him on CGB in the middle of him making a good point. He'll be like, waxing lyrical about how great blue-white is, and I'll just like, boom!
Yes.
Right in the face.
Yes, blue-white is great. Thanks for mentioning that.
So speaking of that, let's talk for just a wee second about the Zendikar Rising Championships before we get into it, because something pretty special happened, which was that a deck, the deck and the pilot who was playing in the final rounds of the tournament, it was really unexpected, and a deck that both of us had kind of poo-pooed on the way into the championship, and also a deck that is near and dear to CGB's heart. So CGB, how did it feel watching a Scottish Gandalf destroy the Zendikar Rising Championships undefeated in Historic with an Azorius control deck? What was that like for you?
Blue-white control. Oh my goodness. First of all, I want to say to everybody who's messaged me or said something to me about this, how like it actually tugs at my heartstrings that people watched this amazing competitive Magic player, Brandon Barclay, dismantle the best players in the world with blue-white control. And you know what they thought? They said, I want to know what CGV thinks of this. I was like, people thought of me. I kept on getting messages and added on Twitter and DMs on Discord and like just all kinds of messages from people being like, did you see blue-white control? And to just be thought of in the same breath as blue-white control is all I ever really wanted in life. So it just hits me right in the feels. But to actually answer the question, of course, it was a beautiful moment. It didn't come up without pings, like twinges of jealousy, because Brandon Barclay is the master of always had it.
He really did have it an awful lot.
He really always had it. Oh, it was. Oh my gosh! If you watched it, if you're like an aggro mage or a mid-range mage, if you're somebody who hates control, watching that must have been painful. Because especially when you can see both hands, you're just like, no, not again. No,
oh my gosh.
No.
Especially since I will say in the final, there was definitely a number of moments of Autumn just really, really, really not having it as well. So
yes,
that was kind of brutal.
Painful.
You know, yeah. I can't hop on it too much because Autumn also had some incredible top decks throughout the weekend, like just top decking Questing Beast for the win and stuff like that. So, you know,
that was against Barclay, right? In Swiss, in Standard, it was.
Yeah.
And I watched that match, and he was playing Dimir control in Standard, and I was like, I would not play it this way. I was freaking out for him. But he made up for all of it with the blue-white historic run.
Yeah,
I can't believe it.
I did see some head scratches on the Standard side for him, but clearly, you know, he won the tournament, so it's not really up for me to criticize his play.
Oh no! I think it's very clear that no matter who you are and what talent level you reach, there will always be people watching you play, going, "Oh my God, what are they doing?"
Absolutely,
it doesn't matter if it's LSV and a bunch of people who just got their first starter decks. You're going to get people saying, why not this? Why not that in chat? It's part of the Magic experience. It's part of the Magic Twitch experience. You can't turn it off. It's just... Magic is so cool because it has so many options, so many different ways that you can play the game. There is expression of personality, even if people don't realize it. And yeah.
Absolutely.
It's part of what's great.
Absolutely. And one of the things I noticed about Barkley, the matches that I watched, was how aggressively he played control. He was like...
Kind of disgusting, though, to be honest.
Kind of the most aggro control mage I've ever seen, you know? He'd be like racing with Gruul. He'd be like, all right, sweet, let's just get in there with my crawling barons and my sad robot and... You know, and I loved how there were just like these several matches. I remember this, you know, one key match against Autumn where like Autumn's like resolving goblins and resolving the horn and getting in there and stuff. And Brad's just like, you're dead in the air. You know, like
Shark.
I don't give a care about your goblins. Like I'm munching on you. So that was a real pleasure, just watching him smash people down.
Yeah, and I would say it's not even like the deck list was very classic. very classic blue-white. The deck that if you had handed it to me, I would have been like, oh, I love this deck, but in Historic, there's too much of this, and there's too much of that, and every deck has a value engine. How do you contain it? Didn't matter.
No.
Didn't matter. Just had it.
No. Just
the answer is always have it.
Just Teferi Absorb, Teferi Absorb.
Yeah.
That's... what else would you be doing in Historic, right? So
it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It actually made me more into Historic, to be honest. I was like, maybe I could play Historic and not have a miserable time. This could be good. This could be good.
Might just finally get you more of a mainstream best of 3 player, perhaps?
No.
Nope. Never gonna happen.
Nope.
Well, moving swiftly on. Before we jump into the questions, I just wanted to take a moment to reminisce about some of my favorite moments on the podcast, because it's been a really fun year doing this. And so the first thing that I want to shout out here is I will say that one of my favorite traditions I've had on this podcast is trying to psych CGB up. You guys aren't privy to the things that are said before the podcast, but there's typically some kind of WWE shout out or some kind of guttural growling or just kind of something to get the mood going. But I have to say, some of my favorite moments on this podcast have been making those intros just to try to make your eyebrows raise.
I know you succeeded.
So yeah, that's been a big fun one. One of my favorite episodes that we've done so far was the Oro banning episode where we did the news flash.
Oh yeah,
that was
God, it was just inspired by kind of the Family Guy, just blood in the streets, people yelling like a hurricane was in town. Yeah,
exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and I just thought it was a good showcase of CGB's theatrical improv chops combined with Arjuna's audio editing props, and I thought we pulled it off, and I was pretty proud of that episode.
There are people who are right now saying that we need more breaking news episodes because of that.
When there is news, we will report it.
Yeah, not in December, man.
Yeah,
not in December. The offices are empty.
Exactly. But we have a lot to look forward to if there's anything I've learned from Magic. So yeah, and then let's see, some other key favorite moments of mine. I will say that ongoing showdowns on the Twitch have always been fun. I don't think that we've ever played a match against each other on stream that didn't have some kind of memorable something happen in it. And
yes,
so those are some of my favorite moments, having that epic Shrines versus Blue White Blink matchup.
That game was like half an hour. That was one game.
CGB won / conceded at 69 life. You couldn't have scripted it, Mm-hmm. Then there was also the mountain in the sideboard incident.
What happened? I don't remember this. I've forgotten this one.
Which you know what I realized? So I actually, to commemorate the incident, I wrote CGB a song and I shared it with him on his stream. And I actually I don't think anyone else heard that song, so I'm gonna include it at the end of this episode.
No.
So CGB has that to look forward to. So yeah, make sure, even if you're like, I don't really feel like listening to the whole thing, just fast forward to the end, listen to this wonderful song that I wrote for CGB, which will tell you the whole story of how Arjuna managed to change a Simic deck into a Temur deck on stream.
To great controversy, by the way.
Yeah, it really was. People wanted my head on a pike, man.
It shows you're doing something well.
I try. If there's one thing better than being just a nasty crap-eating Temur adventure mage, it's being a nasty crap-eating Simic adventure mage who you didn't know is a nasty crap-eating Temur adventure mage. So... yes.
Can I say that quickly that one of my favorite things on the podcast was the aftermath of the Mountain in my sideboard showdown, where I do honestly feel that you and I, with a little bit of competitive juices flowing, did actually solve a format that nobody else, that none of the other content creators it seemed like really tried to solve, which was 2021 standard. Pre-Zendikar Rising standard, that 1 month format on Arena. I think you and I broke it. Dude, I still do.
I agree. I think we were really the experts on that format. I think that if you'd lined us up, we could have told you the best 5 decks in the format, what the ranking was, and why.
And we did on a podcast.
We did indeed.
You could have listened to.
Yeah, I'm very proud of us. Very proud of us for that. Well, I'm sure that we'll cover some of the other wonderful storied history of the show's year-long tenure in the questions, so why don't we just jump into those? Let's get diving in here. The first question comes from Discord user. These were all submitted in Discord, so that's where I'm reading these from. So first question comes from Mild Pro. How did CGB and Arjuna meet? So now we get the true origin story. So I think you got to hear CGB's side of it. So I'll tell you my side of it, and then I'll tell you why it's kind of coincidental here. So believe it or not, even though I was like a rabid consumer of Magic podcast content, I've probably listened to more Magic podcasts than anyone except CGB. So I was huge on Magic podcast content. I was also definitely watching Twitch somewhat to kind of check in on stuff, but I had this massive blind spot on YouTube. So like, apart from watching the occasional MTG Goldfish video, or like I was enjoying Saffron Olive's videos, and apart from that, I was just completely blissfully unaware of people making content on YouTube. So I actually discovered CGB on Twitch, of all places, which just seems really odd when you think about the probability. And it was the Theros Beyond Death pre-release event. And I was just kind of like cruising through different people's channels, and I noticed that CGB was playing this epic mono blue devotion deck. Man, I just love that deck. Like, that deck was so cool, and CGB was just owning people with it. And I remember popping into the chat and just like asking for the deck list, and CGB was like, oh yeah, he like diverted what he was doing to pull it up and chat with me about it. And I was just like, man, this guy's great.
Oh, God. No, you're setting a standard I can't live up to. You got so lucky. And on a release day, I did that? That doesn't sound like me.
Yeah. I was just like, man, this streamer dude is super cool, and he's being really nice to me.
Oh, no.
So, so we talked about the deck list for a while, and then a week or two went by, saw CGB's channel a few more times. And I was kind of revving up the podcast at that time. So I was like, I wonder if CGB would be interested in being on the show. So I reached out to him via his Twitch DMs, which are also probably the least reliable way to get in touch with him. And he just happened to get my message, and he was like, follow up with me literally anywhere else. And
Yep. Now that sounds like me.
Yep.
That's me.
Yep. So I think I messaged him on Discord, and I was like, hey, I run this podcast. Would you like to be on it? And he was like, actually, I know about your podcast, and yes, I'd love to be on it. And that was like a head explode moment for me. Okay, like I was getting some number of hundreds of downloads an episode and stuff, but I felt like no one knew about my podcast. And so here was CGB, who just spontaneously discovered it. So I feel like it was basically a series of very, very improbable events that led to the two of us actually connecting.
That mono blue devotion deck in all of its glory, one of my finer pre-release, and me actually being nice to someone in chat.
It may never happen again.
It probably won't. My fans are snickering. They know.
Right? So anyway, that was wonderful. But, the moment that CGB was actually on the episode, the chemistry was evident. And I think it was only a matter of time before we would end up producing more content together.
And yeah, my side of it is predictable from that point. And kind of what I already alluded to. Just really excited to do the show, really excited to be invited back, really excited to get to do it every week.
Awesome, dude. Love it, love it, love it. Moving on. Question from Ultimate EDH. Both of you, what are your favorite decks/formats from Magic's history, and why did you love them? So I just did a lot of talking CGB, so why don't I ship that question to you?
My answer to this always sounds a lot like a cop-out, and it will appear as a cop-out, but it is the 100% truth. Anybody who asks me my favorite deck, format, or anything like that, the answer is always the next one. because there is nothing I love in Magic the Gathering more than the first opportunity to play with new cards in a new format. If you can make it better, add in a rotation. I know that that's not really answering the question, but I don't really have an answer to the question. If you were to say, what did you think of Kaladesh Amonkhet Standard? I'd have some thoughts. But like, as far as ranking them, I just don't do it. My eye is always on the future. I always can't wait to see and play with new cards. So it's a cop-out answer, but it's the truth. I don't spend a lot of time living in the past when it comes to Magic. And 20-some years into playing the game, it's weird to look back at where we've come from and all the things that have come and gone in Magic. But the fact that I'm still that excited for the future, I just lean into it. Why not? You know, if you have something you love in the game, just stick with it for sure.
Dude, it's cool. You're the David Bowie of Magic, you know? You're just always looking forward.
Yeah, that's me, David Bowie. You could also say I'm a space oddity.
You indeed are a space oddity. And we love you for it. My answer to this question, it's actually kind of funny because when I think about my favorite formats, they are actually some of the more busted ones in recent years. I came back around the release of Shadows over Innistrad, and I do have to say that Standard was pretty epic at that time. We had the Bant Company decks going around, which I think were kind of the contemporary version of the eye-rolly Grown deck that no one wanted to play against. But, you know, we had these sweet, like, green-white tokens decks. Archangel Avacyn was just tearing stuff up. I feel like that whole format between Shadows over Innistrad and the release of Kaladesh, I just thought there were just some really, really cool iterations in there. I personally love Kaladesh. It's probably my favorite Magic set in history. I love it in Limited. I loved it in Standard, even though there were some glaring problems with the power level and the play design. The highest Magic got for me, I think so far, was just getting that Smuggler's Copter down on turn 2 and just playing that game, man. I love that.
Such a degenerate. Degenerate, liking these banned cards. They're terrible game design. I'm being sarcastic in case you can't.
Sarcasm fully interpreted. I feel like we all have like our pet banned cards. Your card where you're like, okay, I know that card sucked and it was too powerful, but I did really love playing with it. And Copter was definitely one of those for me.
Indeed. I agree. And can I just admit something in front of the world? Since it's supposed to be a very special episode.
We've been waiting.
I love cards that get banned. I love them before they get banned and after. I just love doing stupid Magic for a while, having it get banned, and then being able to say I did it before it was banned, and then afterwards talk about how it shouldn't have been banned, or what if they unbanned it, or LOL. You know, all of it's good. What would we have without cards to ban or want to get banned?
Yeah, for the record, I'm not super tilted that so many cards have needed to get banned. I'm just tilted that some of them have taken as long as they did to get banned. I'm definitely down for this cycle of like release an Oko, delete an Oko.
Yeah.
So, and that takes me into my second answer here, which is that I really, really, really did love Throne of Eldraine Standard. Like when that set was new, I had so much fun playing that set, and everyone was complaining, and the Magic world was in an uproar, and blah, 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 blah. But man, I killed some Okos, I resolved some Okos, Fires was fun. It was just a really fun format. So that would be my other answer.
Yeah, I totally respect that. I dig it. That format was broken in half, and we were just learning how broken it was. Remember when Cat Oven might be good?
Yeah, right? When Cat Oven was like the fourth best deck in the format. I remember when Fires wasn't good enough to play. You know, those were the days, man. Those were the days. So, okay, let's keep things moving along here. What do you get from Magic that makes you love the game, MTG Aggro player?
I guess I'll go first. Put me on the spot on this one. First of all, MTG Aggro player. Your name, I don't know about that one, but
not making you love the game.
Okay, that's a good one because there is something. No matter what competitive endeavor I found myself in, whether it was school, business, sports, or Magic the Gathering, one of the things that kept me involved, kept me engaged, and kept me coming back was having a rival. A good rivalry. And I think that's something about Magic, about these forces clashing, whether it's, red mages versus control mages that has been going on for so long, or whether it's Oko versus Golos in these absolutely broken environments, vampires versus Scapeshift, there's always a rival. There's usually a best deck. There's usually something that we're trying to tune to beat it. There are heroes, there are villains. But honestly, this question is I don't want to spend an hour on it, but I probably could, because there's so many things. That's just one thing. The endless rivalries that keep me coming back for more. Magic has so much to it. It's a creative outlet. It's artistic expression. It's a way to express your personality. Like I said, it's also escapism. It's being someone that you can't be in real life. Even if that means you're that degenerate who's playing rogues in the play queue on full control, spamming emotes when your opponent takes 2 seconds, whatever it is. People love to draw conclusions about that, like this type of person, but Magic is escapism. You get to be something that you're not, much like you do in theater. There's so many great things about it that I don't know how to completely answer this question. I don't think there's a way to answer this question.
Yeah, it was a good start there for sure. And I appreciate hearing that. On my side, there's just a couple of things I want to pick out. I, again, could also spend an hour talking about how I love Magic and all the reasons I love Magic. But here's a couple that really stand out to me. One of the things I love most about it is actually how adult of a game it is. And it's funny because a lot of people kind of ironically refer to Magic as being a kid's card game. And it definitely can be played by kids. I mean, I started playing it when I was 10, I think. So it's grokkable by children, but it's actually, when you look at it, a lot of Magic is it really hasn't been that toned down for children. There's a lot of pretty gnarly things in it. There's some pretty gnarly art. It deals with some pretty, I would say, adult subject matter, deeper matters of the occult, and it really unflinchingly in a lot of ways. And I think that a lot of Magic's kind of imitators and competitors have sought to dumb things down and kind of make them... it's like one of the things that's kept me from getting more into games like Legends of Runeterra, for example, is that I think that game's really cool. I think it's well designed. I think there's a lot to like about it. But there's just like this cringe that I feel when I fire it up, because it's just clearly aimed at like very, very young people to be appealing to them. And Magic has somehow managed to maintain somewhat of like an adult bearing to me. And it's even, like when I look at a screenshot of Magic Arena alongside a screenshot of Hearthstone, one of these looks like a kid's game and the other one doesn't. So that's one of my favorite things about Magic. The other thing I wanted to point out is just that there's just something really magical, quote unquote, about the formula of like stat lines, life totals, drawing a card a turn. The foundation of the game is so compelling. The concept of I attack my opponent and I can't attack their minions, and the way that the tempo lines up of games of Magic, there's just something about it that's a hell of a drug. And I just haven't found another card game that has managed to replicate that kind of pacing. Games of Magic just feel more exciting to me than games of just about anything else.
Strong agree.
Awesome. Okay, this one is targeted squarely at you, Covert Go Blue, so get ready.
Okay.
Sierkovitz, associated with 17 lands, by the way, wonderful limited deck tracker and just cool app. If you're into limited, definitely check out 17 lands. It's really, really helpful. Sierkovitz asks, I know CGB hating limited is a bit of a trope by now, but I actually want him to more seriously analyze what is it in limited that he finds repealing. I think repellent is the word he was going for. What do you think, man?
What is it? Well, I think a lot of people will confuse my distaste for formats limited among them as a lack of experience. So I want to get at least something out there. I played competitive limited, and I played several Pro Tour qualifiers, Grand Prix, Nationals. I played a lot of Limited. It's not for a lack of the experience. So for me, it's you talked about Limited on this podcast as every like pool of cards is like a puzzle that you're trying to solve. I don't like solving a puzzle where it's like, these are the pieces, I solved it, now I'm done with it, new puzzle, like quite as rapidly. I like solving a puzzle with like a pool of cards and then trying to solve the same puzzle with a different approach and solve the solution to that puzzle and so on and so forth. So it's almost like a repeatability of the experience. And like, I don't know, that's part of it. Like, what I love about Standard is that it's a small card pool. You only have access to so many solutions. You can always figure out what the best threats and engines are, but you can always try to find different ways to attack them and move them around. And of course, what people call a bad Standard is something with one thing that's broken. But then we have bans, which are so much fun. And I just don't get that experience from Limited. Also, and then I'll give you two other things that are definitely true for me. Limited power level. When I have to play a deck with 9 mountains and 8 swamps, I don't feel like I'm playing the game I enjoy. You know, and as soon as I look at my hand and I've got like a double red card and I've got 3 basic swamps in that hand, and I'm like, what is this? I don't even want to play the game. I just want to disconnect immediately looking at that hand. So for better or worse, the power of dual lands or flexibility in mana bases to build into part of your strategy matters a lot to me, and I can't let it go. I really can't. It just makes me angry to not have that, not be able to put some creativity and some selective approach into like mana base and things like that. So that's another one. And then the other big one that for me is I actually enjoy play patterns, and I enjoy predictable play patterns. And I know that you're going to say in Limited, there's this combat trick, and when you attack with your 2/2, you have to know all the combat tricks in the format. That to me isn't interesting. I like play patterns with powerful cards. I like when my opponent designs that perfect aggro curve of Edgewall Innkeeper, Brushfire Elemental, Bone Crusher Giant Questing Beast, or Embercleave, or like, I want to line up my cards against that. And the predictability has a lot to do with getting to play 4 copies of a card, especially at like rare and mythic power levels, where you might play all day in Limited and not even see the rare or the mythic. You know what I mean? All these things make Standard and Constructed right for me, and Limited not what's enjoyable. That's just the way it is.
That's a really good breakdown. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you talk specifically about the power level thing, because I remember, I love Limited. I'm an avowed Limited mage, and just about any set that comes out in Limited, I'll give it a try. I don't love all of them, just because some of the sets I don't feel are very fun in Limited, but I do love it as a concept. And I remember playing Jumpstart on Arena and walking away from it after like just a handful of matches, because it just felt really underpowered to me. And so I can relate to that feeling, looking at your hand and you're like, these cards suck. Like,
yeah.
I'm not looking forward to the turn of the game where I get to cast any of these cards.
Yeah, it's not something I've heard people mention, but I think it's easy to get. It's like going at a certain speed, right? If Standard speed is 45 miles per hour, and Modern speed is 75 miles per hour, and Limited speed is 35 miles per hour, there's always an adjustment if you have to play a different speed. And I just have my comfort zone. I love small Standard pools and Standard formats, and that hasn't changed since they invented it, since they called it Type 2.
Yeah. Also, I feel like it's just very, very difficult to play a pure control game in Limited, so I wonder if that's been
I've done it.
Part of it.
I've done it.
which is an achievement unto itself. I would definitely have liked to have been there.
Can I just
you want to tell us about it?
Can I give you a story?
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I?
Let's get some old man CGB going on here.
It was inspired by a tournament I was invited to but couldn't attend, which is the second Pro Tour in history in Pro Tour Los Angeles. The winner of that Pro Tour drafted 5 copies of Gaseous Form. Do you know what this card does? 2 in a blue, aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature cannot deal or receive damage.
Okay, so it's a remove your creature card.
Yeah, it's a fog on a creature, but it's also like an infinite blocker.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I immediately, like, at every draft or sealed I could do, just started drafting, like, every single Gaseous Form and just make all their creatures suck, draft Circles of Protection. Easy. And then watch their library expire.
Yep. The old classic control strategy of your opponent dying by old age. Gotta love it.
Yes. I'm not afraid to pull it out in limited.
Indeed. So moving along here, Squirp asks, this is a fun question, CGB. I think you will enjoy answering this question. If WotC put you in charge for a day, what would you change?
It won't be... I think most people will be disappointed with my answer to this. I think most people won't like it. I would probably not change anything. I know that. Okay. Part of it is that I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it because for some reason that's not the way my brain works, trying to figure out what I would change about like things that are I'm more like I get on the bus and I take the ride instead of I contemplate how the driver should be handling the situation. And Magic is a bus I've been riding for a really long time, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe if you had asked me this a while ago, if you had asked me this in Meridian Block when Skull Clamp was printed, maybe I'd have had a lot of bile and things to say, you know? As it is, I've gotten to meet people who work at Wizards of the Coast. I've also gotten to learn a lot about how this game interacts with people and how people interact with the things that they love, especially once you get the internet involved. And I've gotten to learn about just all kinds of things. And for the most part, I prefer to keep riding the bus. I want them to do what they do pretty well, which is they continue to, in ways that are hard to always understand, delight and surprise their audience. It's not always pleasant, but it's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be nothing but feels goods. It's supposed to be hits and misses. It's supposed to be frustration and agony so that there's also like joy and happiness on the other side. So I've learned a proper respect for when I'm frustrated. That is not always a bug. Sometimes it's a feature. And I like to sit back and enjoy the ride, if that makes sense. Honestly, if there's something I would change for sure, I'd just make sure that nobody there had Twitter accounts, man. just don't read it. Because, man, the idea that they need more feedback, I don't think that it could possibly be correct. I think they have endless amounts of feedback, and I think a lot of it is either completely uninformed or completely unfair, and they're not afraid to get personal. And as a person who has hundreds of comments a day about various things about me, many of which completely miss the point, and some that do get personal, that has a very negative effect over time. And I know some people who have worked for Wizards and work at Wizards, and I know it's affected them. And I don't think people realize the cumulative effect of what they call honest criticism and feedback has on individuals. It's not as simple as compartmentalizing it into figuring out how to do a better job. It's impossible not to take a lot of these things as a reflection of maybe not you personally, but as your profession, absolutely. And it wears you down. And there is a certain confidence in building these things, in building these awesome games, in building these structures around the game, in building this content around the game, that we need them to feel like they can go do something awesome, or we can't expect them to do something awesome. So I guess the thing I would change the most is, and I don't know if this needs changing, I don't work there, but I would definitely make sure that people felt empowered to build the game they want to build, and we will adjust and figure it out from there. Because I think that they have to have confidence and they have to be inspired to do great things. That's what I've learned about leading people in business. Anyway, I don't know if that was disappointing. I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah, it was just a very mature adult answer from the CGB, so I appreciate that. Not that I expected any different. Okay, so if I was put in charge for a day at WotC, one thing I definitely know I would do right off the bat is like hire some more developers for MTG Arena. Without knowing anything about what happens behind the scenes at WotC, I just feel like that's a good business move. Hire some more developers for Arena, fix some of these silly little bugs. Why am I still getting put into the play queue after a ranked match when I hit play? Like, why is that still happening? Why can I still not select my default land art? Just very basic stuff. Why is importing and exporting from Arena still so annoying sometimes? Why do I still get these stupid error messages that I feel like simple programming could avoid? That kind of a thing.
I can get behind these, to be fair.
I'd love to see a little bit more of that. Granted, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I just feel like let's get a few more professional grade salaries together here. Let's hire a couple more people and let's just bang out some of these bugs that I feel like have been kind of preventing Arena from being the best program it could be. Another thing is that I do feel like Wizards has made a number of blunders on the what I would call like the soft skills side of the spectrum. So I think that the hard skills of developing a good and compelling game, they're doing really well at. I think the soft skills part of it, which is things like not messing up your canon, things like if you follow any of the storyline stuff that's been happening in the past year, they've kind of totally botched it. Granted, like I'm not a big Vorthos, and I don't think that you are either, CGB, and so it's not like super near and dear to my heart. But I just know that like a lot of people have felt really betrayed by some of the narrative directions that WotC have taken in the last year. And so, you know, I'd probably want to have a fairly realistic conversation with whoever makes those decisions about just, you know, trying to improve that. Because Magic clearly has so many cool creative inputs and there are so many interesting characters that can be featured in the game. And I just think that we want to let these natural romances play out. You know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying. And I agree 100% that I would like to see story managed. If I had to predict, knowing what I know from business, what's going on with story is too many cooks in a kitchen.
Could be. Yeah.
I believe when you see a story take the kind of turns and a department and basically a section of the company, which is what story really should be, but honestly might be a cubicle in the back corner. When you see the twists and turns of that, it does feel like too many people have too many agendas for the story team. I guess what I would do if I were in that situation is get everybody out of the story team who's not the frickin' story team and make sure there are people who are passionate about telling great stories in charge of that.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And then the final thing is just, I've heard a lot of rumblings about how Wizards hiring isn't as inclusive as it could be. You know, just kind of a number of depressing stories on that front. And so I would want to just look into that a little bit. I would just want to see what was actually going on and whether those claims were true and what would need to be done to address that, if anything. But that's I'm really speaking from inexperience there. So, you know, I don't really want to go deep on talking about stuff that I myself don't know about. But I would investigate that. For sure.
Good idea.
Okay, all right. Next question here. CGB, asked by Plasma Python. If you got to design your own card, what would it be?
Oh, man. See, this is why I'm no good at these episodes, because my answers are almost always the same. I wouldn't. I want to be surprised. I don't want to design cards. I want to play cards. Dude, I've learned the joy that is getting myself out of my own way and just learning to enjoy what I do have, and kind of, I think that's why, maybe this will answer another question in the future preemptively, but I think that's why I can make a different standard deck every day when most people get bored with the format in 3 weeks. I've really just learned how to immerse myself in these things and enjoy the ride. Not to... I don't spend time trying to come up with how to build a Magic card. I don't. It doesn't even cross my mind.
Okay. I've designed a Magic card. Are you ready?
Okay, cool.
Okay. Grandmaster Covert Go Blue.
Okay.
1 blue, human wizard. 2/2. And Covert Go Blue Grandmaster has the text: tap, counter target spell, return Covert Go Blue Grandmaster to its owner's hand. Yes!
It doesn't have haste or flash? Or...
No, it doesn't have haste. Nope.
No?
Nope. It's
unplayable garbage.
It's
dude.
a slow boil, man. It's a slow boil.
Unplayable trash.
No, man. This is a slow cooker, man. This is going to get banned in multiple formats, CGB.
Not really, no. But how about tap to counter target question?
Counter target question? I like
tap
it.
Tap to deflect target inquiry from the audience.
That's a Covert Go Blue, master of deflection.
I like it.
All right, that's my contribution for the day. Jay Silv, wonderful content creator Jay Silv, writer for Channel Fireball, also mod of the Reddit Spikes community, and just overall cool dude. And previous guest on the show, Jay Silv, asks, who was your favorite guest? And CGB doesn't count. So
good thing. Be too easy of a question.
Yeah, right. Slam dunk. I'll let you go first on this, CGB. Who is your favorite guest as a listener for this show?
Oh man, well, the episode I listened the most closely to, and I hope I'm not stealing yours, Aaron Gertler right after winning DreamHack, and it wasn't because I liked him or his deck. It's because
just for the record, Aaron. All right.
Oh, it's because I do like Aaron. He made it up to me later, but it's because I recognized that Teamer Adventure deck was the end of my beloved blue-white control in that format, and I needed all the information I could get to see if there was any salvaging the situation. But it was clear after that podcast that it was not the way, and that the blue-white control that Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa won the world championship with just a few weeks prior was dead and gone at the hands of Lucky Clover, Aaron Gertler, and his mob of adventure nonsense.
You know, it's funny actually, because I will say that when I go back, I think it was probably Aaron Gertler for me as well. And one of the reasons for that is just that he was the very first guest on the very first episode of the show. And so that's very, very special for me. And also, I just think he was a great guest. He does so well what I enjoy doing on this show, which is just like going deep and geeking hard.
Yeah.
Getting really nitty gritty. And so to that end, I would also lump in Rint as well. He's another, Maxim, another one of my favorite guests for the same reason. I just love talking decks with people who've been spending months building them. It's just one of the most satisfying things for me. I'd like to do a little bit more of that on the podcast. I haven't had another one of these kind of a deck auteurs step forward, so to speak.
When's our 4-hour blue-white control?
With Mistman?
Let's go! Hey, that hurts.
It's kind of like when kids ask, why don't kids get a kids day, right? Because we have a Mother's Day and a Father's Day. Why don't the kids get a kids day, right? And the parents are like, well, that's the other 363 days out of the year. That's you, CGB.
I fail to see the point you're trying to make. Just as a good child would not recognize the lack of a kid's day.
Master of deflection strikes again. Shout out to Jay Silv. He was an excellent guest on the show.
I also want to say Danny West was very fun because it was
dude.
one of the complainiest episodes I've ever heard from you. And I'm still looking for that. I never get that, Arjuna. Like, you and I seem to have a lot of fun. It's been a long time since, like, I've heard you have just a good rant out anger episode like you did about Elspeth Conquer's death and your episode with Danny West. And on that note, I also want to shout out Danny T. Law as one of my good friends, and I really appreciate having him on the show. He would probably be my favorite guest if I didn't talk to him so often. There's a kind of a novelty there, you know what I mean? But I think he's a really cool guy, and I like his work, and I want to make sure he gets a shout out here too.
Yeah, Danny T's sick, man. The more I think about it, the more wonderful guests I remember that we've had on the show. Brian Gottlieb was an amazing episode. Absurd Heroine was a really good episode. One of my favorites, and just honestly one of my favorite people to talk to in the Magic space. Go check her out. Absurd Heroine. She does amazing YouTube content. Just like super spicy brews, super colorful, wonderful video maker, wonderful content creator, wonderful deck builder, and just a wonderful human being. So yeah, really, really pleased I get to call her a friend.
Deathsea was on the thing about the Deathsea interview is I just kept nodding my head because it felt like he was going through so many of the same things I go through with content. It was and I had never really had a conversation with him before, but it was so much fun.
Man, Magic players are cool.
Yeah.
Content creators are cool people. I'm just continually blown away by the people that I meet in this space. So good job. If we didn't mention you, it's not because we didn't love you as a guest. Okay, let's keep moving along here. Interesting question. I wonder if this lands for you, CGB. What's some of your favorite MTG artwork and why? Asked by Judea.
All right, this one definitely falls into the category of questions I've answered a few hundred times, but I actually enjoy this one. The answer is Nightmare, the original.
Sick artwork, yeah.
Melissa Benson's art, and it's for a very niche reason. Of course, I loved the card. I didn't play cards that weren't black for my first year and a half of playing Magic. My first deck was well over 100 cards and contained 9 copies of Nightmare and 3 Demonic Tutors and a bunch of Drain Lice and Nivenril's Disc and everything else. And the only lands were swamps. I mean, that was my very, very early days of Magic. Black was by far my favorite color at first. And I went to a convention, and I don't remember where it was. It might have been Origins in Columbus, Ohio. And Melissa Benson was there. And she had a booth, and there was nobody there. There was no line. There was no one else.
What?
She's just chilling with some guy, and there's a big, huge framed poster-sized Nightmare, and I'm like, oh my god! And I had only gotten a card signed before on one occasion, and it was by Richard Garfield, and that's a whole other story.
Sick.
But I was like, I've got 9 Nightmares. I wonder if she'll sign my Nightmares. And my mom was like, I'm sure that, you have to pay her or something like that. And I just went up to her, and I was so shy and I was so scared, and I pulled out a binder, Now remember, I had 9 Nightmares. I just opened the first page of the binder.
And it was just all Nightmares.
It was just all Nightmares. It was the first page. And she just looked at it. And she looked at me, and you could tell, she was just wanted to cry. That the first page of this kid's binder was all Nightmare, and she signed every single one of them.
What a hero! Free. What a hero! That's so cool, man. The artists of MTG, you can appreciate them as much as you want, and they're still chronically underappreciated. They just bring such a deep amount to this game. So much of the card is the art, and so much of the attachment that you form to the cards comes from the art, and that really can't be overstated. So, yeah, that's really awesome. The first artist I remember really loving in Magic the Gathering, and this goes way back, one of the original artists, Anson Maddox.
Yes. Force of Will.
Oh, dude, Anson, all right. Here's just a couple of the cards that you may remember from Magic's history that Anson Maddox has illustrated. Sengir Vampire, the original Sengir Vampire. Animate Dead, one of my all-time favorite artworks. Llanowar Elves, the original frickin' Llanowar Elf, was a badass-looking mohawked elf illustrated by Anson Maddox. He also did Disintegrate, which is just one of the most classic like D&D style artworks you'll ever see. And if I had to pick one that totally won me over in my 10-year-old playing Magic self, it was Lure, the enchantment Lure, which is this golden apple with a skull reflected in it. And this artwork was designed, it had to be designed to be something that would be fascinating to look at. And this art just delivered so hard for me. I had a copy of this card. Plus, I just loved it. I love the whole Lure Basilisk stupid thing you could do in green. So yeah, one of my all-time favorite cards and artworks.
Green removal.
Green removal. Yeah, this was back before we had... I don't know. I don't even want to go into it. Back before green had everything. So, yeah.
Simple times.
Anson Maddox, shout out. There's so much MTG art that I love, but he's really he's the start, the middle, and the finish of my favorite Magic art. Did you have any additional things you wanted to say there, CGB, or should I keep moving along?
I was trying to... I might be wrong on the Force of Will thing.
Oh.
I might have been thinking of like Arcane Denial. Might be what I was thinking of.
Okay.
But that's all. They'll tell me if I'm wrong. It's fine. Just check YouTube comments. They've got this.
They'll get you. They'll get you. Let's answer this technical question. I think it's kind of interesting. Aces Full Moon 64 asks, when a new set releases, what process do you guys use to brew new decks? Do you start with threats, then fill around that? Or answers first, then threats? Do you brew with current meta in mind, or do you try to project the new meta and brew decks for that meta? I think you're an excellent person to answer this question, CGB. So how do you go about approaching this?
Thanks. It depends on the deck, and it depends on the card and the idea. So an aggro deck, like built around maybe a new tribe if elves are pushed in the next set or something like that, I don't want to take the meta into account very much. I just want to build the most powerful 1, 2, 3, 4 curve and try to make it consistent. Just do your own thing. Don't worry about the meta and see how far you can push that synergy. If I see something like Dream Trawler that's clearly a control finisher, then you have to consider the meta a lot. You want to run the best answers and things that you think will answer the most popular cards in the format. If it's a combo, I want to ignore the meta entirely. I want to make the leanest, most efficient version of the combo deck designed to do the combo as often as I possibly can. So the answer is that it depends on what you're building around and what you're trying to build. Also, your goals. Are you trying to win a big tournament early in a format? Yes, you should have the meta in mind. Are you trying to get Arjuna of the Arena Craft podcast to notice you in a pre-release stream because you're playing something totally radical that other people haven't caught on to? Then go linear. Don't worry about the meta. Build something powerful. Look for the things that work together and try not to get caught in the trap of all blue decks up until this set play this card, so I must play this card too. Don't be afraid to try things that are completely new and look weird. Because I can't tell you how many times people told me that mono blue devotion deck should have card X, Y, or Z, and I was like, but then it's not a combo deck. You're missing that I'm trying to build a combo deck, not a blue value deck or a blue control deck, right? So, yeah, it depends on your goals, and it depends what you want to happen, but really, yeah, depends a lot. What do you think?
This is going to be my answer. This is kind of one of my broader, more meta answers for this game, which is that I think when you look at decks in Magic, a lot of decks in Magic are built around one key concept. Not all of them, but a lot of the new decks worth exploring in a new meta are built around one idea. So I'm going to give you an example. A lot of the busted cards in these recent formats give us a clue about this. For example, Wilderness Reclamation. The concept of Wilderness Reclamation was that you could use your mana twice, and sometimes you could double your mana if you were doing things at instant speed at the precise end of your turn. And so what those decks did was they took this concept. We have one card which gives us mana on our opponent's turn and or doubles our mana, and they basically constructed the deck backwards from there, right? So all of the decisions that were made to build that deck were just to prop up and enhance what the core concept of the deck. And it's really interesting to think about how if you go back and examine some of those deck lists for Wilderness Reclamation, they're some of the leanest deck lists you've ever seen. You read through the deck list and you're just like, this deck kind of feels like nothing. It kind of feels like there's not very much going on. There's so few heavy hitters in the deck. There's so it's lacking a lot of the typical earmarks that you think of a powerful deck. But the one core concept was so strong for that card and for that deck that it allowed you to generate an entire plan around it and kind of leverage other busted cards that weren't immediately game ending, such as Growth Spiral, which, that was one of the best Growth Spiral decks that ever existed, was that standard Wilderness Reclamation deck. And so I love stuff like that. I mean, of course, another good example is Fires of Invention, right? That's another key concept. And the concept is, what deck would I build if I could resolve 2 spells a turn without having to pay for them? And that was a deck that allowed us to exploit cards that otherwise would have seen no play at all in Standard, such as the Red Cavalier. So when I'm looking at new cards and new metas, I'm looking at the new cards that we're given, and I'm thinking about, like, what concept do these cards give us access to that we didn't have access to before? And what can we do with that? Now, there are cards that are clearly not concept cards. They're answer cards, such as Scavenging Ooze, really good example. No one builds, like, 4-color ooze, you know what I mean? So I think that, part of the new meta is just thinking about, you earmark these cards that are clearly answers. And I think to answer one of your specific questions, I think most brewers probably don't think about answers first. I think it's usually concepts and threats first.
Sickos like me, man.
yeah, sickos like CGB, right? But I think the first part of a format is usually like concepts and threats. And I think that the deeper you go into the format, the more answers make their way into decks. The more you see decks that look like just a long list of answers to the format. Like the Blue-Black Control, great example in the current meta, which you just didn't see at the beginning of Zendikar Rising as much anyway. Shall we move on?
Good answer. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we're getting down to it here. So I just want to make sure there's a few questions that we get to here. Calibian asks, to both of you, what's your favorite hobby besides Magic the Gathering? I'm really curious to hear this, CGB, because, I know that you're a multifaceted human being.
What?
But when I think about CGB, like, what does CGB do when the stream turns off? It's just more Magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, CGB plays Magic, swims in a lake, takes a daily walk around the neighborhood, hangs out with his dogs, hangs out with his wife,
yes,
and plays more Magic.
Yeah. You got it. What else? All right, is that you answered the question? I mean, are we done?
Is that it? Can we move on now?
I'll tell you the truth. When I need something in my life that is not Magic, when I need to decompress in a different way, it's a two-faceted approach. I go into the spare bedroom. I draw all the curtains. I light a very small lamp, and I power up this thing in the corner called an Xbox 360. And I play a game from the deep, deep past that has kept me company on many a lonely night for many, many years. It's called NCAA Football 2013. And I'm in year like 2055 of my dynasty. I've won something like 70 national championships. Okay, that's an exaggeration. I've lost like 5 games in about 30 years.
Winning never gets old for Covert Go Blue, let me tell you.
And the other side of the approach is, while I play this football game that I'm destined to win by 50 to 100 points, I'm listening to various books on Audible, usually a Stephen King novel or a Jack Reacher novel. For some reason, that combination of things can take me out of all kinds of bad headspaces and just amplify good ones, help me sleep at night when I need to sleep. But there you go, NCAA football 2013 and Stephen King or Lee Child novels.
Love it. How much a part of your life these days would you say improv is, like theater improv? If that was something that you had access to or you had a good community with that, would you be involved in theater still?
The answer is no. I appreciate everything I learned from theater, but I came to recognize very quickly after college that a majority of what I loved about it was the people I got to do it with. And I'm just not good at building those bonds. I think I'm a very socially awkward person. I don't know how to keep lasting friendships in a lot of ways. And a lot of the reasons that I made those friends in college is because they knew that about me and put up with me anyway and loved telling me when I was being weird, awkward, or obnoxious. And it was almost a game to them to socialize me as a kid from a small town in the big city going to college. So I miss them. I think they'd be proud, and I think that they would tell me that I am engaging in theater. For anybody who's watched my streams, that I very much am engaged. I've engaged my theater muscles to this day, but I'm not interested in going out and trying to be in a show or trying to work as a producer or assistant director. I am deeply entrenched in Magic the Gathering, in content, in entertaining my fans. I wake up these days with two thoughts. One, did the puppy have an accident? And two, how am I going to entertain my fans today? And I like it that way. If I had to memorize lines for a production on top of that, it would be such a distant priority. It may as well not be there.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I definitely know that your theatricality comes out every day that I see you making content. So I appreciate that it gets to live on in its ideal form. As for myself, I'm one of these people with too many hobbies. So picking a favorite one would just be, the question doesn't even really compute for me. I'm like, Icon has favorites? So one of my longest standing loves in my life has been music. I was raised in a musical environment. I've been playing musical instruments since I was born. The instrument that I have probably spent the most time playing and have the most mastery over is the drums. I am one of those people who, like, you always know a drummer because when they're looking in the fridge or when they're brushing their teeth or when they're whatever, they're like hammering something out. There's always a rhythm happening for a drummer. And so that's me. Definitely played and listened to an incredible amount of music throughout my life. Let's see, what other hobbies? Favorite hobbies? I do like long walks around the neighborhood. I think that's something you and I share. CGB.
Podcast time, man. Podcast
dude.
time.
If I don't get a good walk in on a day, then it's just not as good of a day as it could have been. And then, you know, I'm a very literary person. I have written a lot of poetry in my life. I actually, when I went to college, I was aspiring to be a writer. I was kind of working towards getting a degree in creative writing before I busted up out of there and started working as an audio engineer. So those are like the two big creative hobby pursuits of my life, is writing and music.
Nice, dude. Those are good ones.
Now podcasting. Yep. Now podcasting.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's how I want to go out here.
Okay.
I'm springing this on you, all right?
Okay.
I want to go out with us each asking each other a question about the other that we've been curious about or that we would like to know. All right. So
serious questions.
Any question. All right. Here's my question for you, CGB. This'll show you how serious or not serious it needs to be. Okay.
Okay.
You don't have to give me the specific details, but I get the impression that you are very tall. Is that true?
Just a bit above average, tall enough that the average lady can wear heels, and I'm still taller, the important stuff.
I don't know if it's the camera angle or something, but every time I see you move, like stand up, and every time I see you walking around, you just walk and move like an extremely large person.
It is not an accident. how the camera is situated. There are a lot of studies that tall people get advantages. And other YouTubers that I've met in person's first comment has been, "Oh my God, you're tall." But I'm not like 6'8" or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm a comfortable 6'1"
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's, little bit taller than myself. I am hovering right around 6 foot tall.
Yeah, see? We're about the same height, but you see how I'm shot and
Yes.
how I carry myself with that
the
dude in charge confidence?
The film is definitely, the camera angles are set up to enhance the effect. All right. So that was my super superficial question for you, CGB. What question do you have for the Arjuna man?
It's not as silly. I feel like I've told my own story of getting into Magic or the times I've tried to compete at Magic, but I want to know, was there a time in your life where you went after competitive Magic with the full brute strength and power of your will? Or, if not, why not?
That's a really great question. And I think it's one that every content creator in the Magic space has to come up against eventually. So the answer is no. I have not fully devoted myself to the pursuit of competitive Magic. It is something that, in theory, I would like to do at some point. I believe it or not, I am actually very fiercely competitive. And one of the things that I love about Magic is that it's a really healthy place for me to channel my competitive nature. And as anyone who, like, in my local draft pod knows, or people who like play me at the local shop will know, I want to win. I'm one of those people who sits down at the pre-release playing for basically nothing, and like, I want to win. I want to take it down. So I do have that about me. I think I've honestly spent the last handful of years learning how to play Magic, which is a funny thing for me to say because I've been playing since I was 10, like I said. But the first go around in your childhood for most people, including myself, was fairly casual. So I feel like I picked up the basics. I feel like I have an intuitive feeling of the game because of that. There was a lot of groundwork I didn't need to lay in coming back to the game this time around. But having said that, there's just still a lot of learning to actually get good at Magic. And so I feel like I've spent the last handful of years becoming a competent player. I think if I were to aspire to be a really competitive player, I would have to devote an amount of time and effort to the game, which I have not yet. Part of it's just that maybe it's just that I'm kind of a balanced person, and if I start spending too much of my life doing one thing, then I can sometimes feel like it throws me out of whack. And I do think that in order to be the best Magic player you can be, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. So I'm not sure that I'm willing to make the sacrifices that it would require to be the best Magic player I could be. Having said that, I think if I were to throw myself more fully into it, it would probably be on the back of my content creation career. I think that growing my content to a certain point would probably enable me to, do things like actually get paid for playing Magic, i.e. having patrons or supporters on Twitch, stuff like that, which would probably incentivize me to play more. One of the challenges has just been that I run my own business in internet marketing, and I spend a lot of time in front of the computer, and so it can be sometimes hard to like sit back down and grind out 4 hours of competitive Magic after doing that. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but the short answer is I would love at some point in my life to make a go of it, and we'll see how the next handful of years pans out. If I continue going deep into the world of Magic, and if certain stars align to support me in just like really, really playing a lot more Magic, then I'd definitely love to try.
Cool. I hope that if that's something that you want, that you get the opportunity to do it. I will say that it's totally possible to do that thing and then end up where we're at today, which is still a curious student, a fan of the game, with a lot to share with other players, but not necessarily with it does. Honestly, this is something that struck me a lot hanging out with pro players. The unbalancing is extreme. It often just doesn't feel like there's conversation or like there's anything going on that doesn't have to do with Magic. And as a person who plays Magic full time and is very deep into Magic, that feels weird to walk away from a conversation being like, wow, they talk about Magic a lot.
Yeah.
But it's true. The competitive side, that path can be all consuming, and it's definitely not for everybody. I've been a lot happier since I came out, but I'm always grateful that I gave myself the chance. So if that's something you decide you want, I hope you do.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I would at least like to, I'd like to make a run at a GP, or I'd like to participate in some level of tournament and get some level of somewhere, because I think I'm capable of it. And, I would like to explore the depths of my capability, but it definitely would require just getting a lot more serious about the game. And I would probably have to training montage for a year to actually stop making the silly mistakes, pay enough attention to the game, get my head in the right mindset enough to really level up enough to do that. So we'll see. If it's happening, you will hear about it here first.
Awesome.
That's going to do it for this wonderful year anniversary episode of the Arena Craft podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. We literally just scraped the surface of the number of people who submitted questions, and I couldn't be more grateful to all of you. Thanks so much for showing up, for blowing up our Discord, blowing up the questions channel. I hope this has been fun for you, and I apologize if you're looking forward to having your question read but didn't have it read. I'll look for other opportunities to get some of those answered, because you guys asked some really fantastic questions. All right, CGB, thanks so much for being, for joining me on this journey, and looking forward to many, many more episodes to come. And I'm excited to get back in next week to talking about, guess what? Magic the Gathering.
Congrats on a year, man.
Thanks, buddy.
A whole frickin' year. 52 frickin' episodes. Very, very cool.
It's been a good time. All right. You can continue to find the Arena Craft podcast in most of the good places. You can find us on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We're on YouTube. I occasionally stream on Twitch. CGB streams weekly on Twitch. So go look for him there. And also he's on YouTube. Go look for his stuff there. Okay, CGB. Hope you have a good weekend, and I will catch you next week.
Later.
Oh, and by the way, listen to the Mountain in the Sideboard song.
Don't.
And
turn it off. It's over.
And
we're
bask in CGB's ruin and shame.
No, we finished. We finished the show.
It's game 5 in the final minutes. It's going well, I'm about to win it. CGB, he's feeling blue. That's because he never knew I had a mountain in the sideboard. He never knew I was splashing it. Mountain in the sideboard. I wish it out, then I'm smashing it. Simic travels and I'm playing it cool. Flipping cards like I'm skipping school. Never knew I was such a tool, but I gotta make him look the fool. I had a mountain in the sideboard. He never knew I was splashing it. Mountain in the sideboard. I wish it out, then I'm smashing it. Mountain in the sideboard. He never knew I was splashing